Hi, everyone. This is the Leadership with Heart podcast, and this is Heather Younger, your host. Employee experience and retention is powered by emotions. Managers and or leaders within organizations get to choose which emotions they unleash from within the people they lead. Leaders, meaning supervisors or above in an organization, drive much of the positive or negative emotions by their actions or inactions, their words, or what they fail to say. When a manager chooses their words and their actions carefully, they exhibit great emotional intelligence. These managers are often thought of as leaders who care, or as I like to call them, leaders with heart. This special brand of leader drives engagement and loyalty simply by being themselves. Are these leaders perfect? Absolutely not. It is in their awareness and sharing of some of their imperfections that we realize their brilliance. In this podcast, I ask you to see yourself from the stories my guests tell about the times when they were not the best versions of themselves, but how they used their hearts to guide them to a place of deeper connection with their teams and heightened leadership prowess. Before we get started, I wanted to remind you to follow us on Twitter at Customer Fanatics. That's customer and then Fanatix. And also just follow me on LinkedIn at Heather Younger. That is because I'm in the process of writing a book based upon this podcast, which will have amazing stories of those on the show. And I'm going to be going a little deeper too, so you will not want to miss it. But I'll be putting out tidbits, asking for feedback related to the book cover and just ideas and colors. I want you to be a part of that. I want you to lend your voice to that. Also, don't forget to subscribe to our newsletter at customerfanatics.com, and you'll get a couple freebies as well, including the first chapter to my book and some emotional intelligence tips as well. Thank you so much for listening, and hopefully you enjoy this show. Hi, everybody. This is Heather with the Leadership with Heart podcast, and today I have Carey Jenkins on the call with me. And I'm really excited to have her on. I love when people who are actually listening refer new guests my way. And Carey is one such guest. She was someone who was referred by someone who listens. And thank you. And I looked at her background and thought, I think she's going to be perfect for this, kind of her journey to leadership and the role she's in right now. So welcome, Carey.
Thank you. I'm happy to be here.
So where are you right now on your leadership journey?
I'd say I'm at the beginning, honestly. So I became CEO of Substantial, which is a product development studio in Seattle, Washington, 9 months ago. So I've been at the company for 7 years, and I've been on the leadership team for about half of that time. But 9 months ago, I became the CEO, and it sort of started my leadership journey afresh. I feel like a newbie again, in a good way, mostly. It was a huge moment for me. And it was me stepping into a lot of really uncomfortable places. And I've never been a CEO before. So the entire idea of the role for me was new, even though as a leader at the company, I had been doing many of the things that I still do now. But this idea of stepping into something that high profile with that much responsibility, buck stops at me, and that's new. I've never had that opportunity before. So everything feels incredibly fresh and in a good way, like I said, most of the time, although sometimes it's overwhelming, but it's this just massive growth opportunity. And that's the part that's really energizing for me. I'm a big sort of learner and want to grow. And every day I'm like, I want to be a better leader today than I was yesterday. And I make lots of mistakes and I have lots of wins and things I'm proud of, but it's a new day every single day. And so I just try to be better and learn something every single day. And this is it's a massive opportunity to do that. Massive.
Well, I love the two things. One, I love the fact that you're wanting to be a continuous learner, that this idea of just never being perfect, always learning, always growing, just never staying still, never being stagnant. That's, just a great, great trait, I think, for a CEO, for a leader, period. And then this idea of we start fresh every day. That is just, I have to say, I think that's just a great way to reframe what others might think of as like, oh gosh, yesterday was like hellacious. I think it's a great way to just reframe that and say, okay, yesterday was so great. Today I have an opportunity to shine. I have an opportunity to help others shine. And
change my mindset on this. And I think that is missing so much in workplaces on the employee side, on the leadership side. And so it's refreshing to hear that from you.
Yeah, it probably started as a defense mechanism in some respects. You have a bad day and you're like, well, how do I wipe that off the off the slate and start new? So, I'm a big believer in sort of new beginnings. So, I'm one of those people who believe strongly in the new year and birthdays, sort of these milestones that give you a moment to start fresh. And so doing it day to day is just a much smaller increment where you can iterate and improve. And I work in digital product. My whole company is around iteration and continuous improvement. That's our philosophy. And so it's very ingrained in the way we create digital products and launch digital products. And a couple years into my tenure here, I was really struggling in my career. I had a baby and was coming back from maternity leave, and that was incredibly challenging. And at some point, I connected this approach we take to digital products to who I am as a person, what my career is. And that's what sort of started this mindset of like, hey, I could actually grow myself. I can iterate on myself. One mistake or one setback, I can learn from that. And that will actually make me stronger rather than make me weaker. And I started to connect the two things much more intentionally. This approach that's broadly accepted as the best way to launch, to create and launch amazing products, and to use that mindset to think about myself and my career. And it was a real watershed moment for me.
I think that's a really big, powerful nugget for those who are listening. We talk about this idea of leadership being a journey, and even just more recently with some of the guests, they've been talking about this idea of starting fresh, or, I started to this role and now I'm in this role and it's brand new and I'm a brand new leader and I get to start from square one, and those ideas. But this idea of iteration, the continuous improvement process we talk about with digital or any product development, service development, and all of that iteration, absolutely, I think, translates beautifully to what we do with ourselves. And I think that also it sounds to me like it would give you more freedom. If it gives you, number one, it could help you relax and loosen up a bit, right? Be more free with your people, and also give yourself more grace, because with iterations, failures are accepted and are expected. So it's just like this thing is I don't even know if we want to call it failure, but whatever it is, the thing it's not going to work, and it's not going to work tomorrow. And that's okay, because tomorrow it might work and maybe it won't. And so just being okay with that constant journey towards continuous.
Exactly. I love that word, grace. And, if you're a perfectionist, and many of us are, particularly female leaders, we're perfectionists by our nature, which I don't think is a good thing. that's not my proudest attribute. But it gives you a little grace. It gives you some breathing room. And I will say that it's a mindset I have to remind myself of. Like, even though I do it by rote, in product development, transitioning that mindset to your career and your personal life and your own personal growth, I have to remind myself. It's not, that's a journey I take every day.
It's so true. So I have a question for you. What does, you've been in this role for 9 months, but you've been there for 7 years. What would you say your team would say of you and your leadership style? How would they describe your leadership style?
Authentic, number one. And that's intentional. That's been something I've worked on quite a bit, particularly once I joined a leadership team. What you see is what you get with me. I'm a direct person. I'm an emotional person. I feel things. I express my feelings. It's the way I process best. I've worked quite a bit to make sure I'm not just sort of unloading my emotions on other people, but I need to feel them. And so if I'm reacting in the moment, you see that. Although I try to be, measured and appropriate about that. I'm not suggesting I'm just, blah. Although sometimes I still am. This is the journey I take. Really, the learning on a day-to-day basis is how to be who I am, which is a person who feels things very deeply, and thinks that way and processes that way, and how I can model the positive aspects of that, which is that I'm direct, I'm honest, and there's no subterfuge, there's no, right? Those are the good things. The negative parts of having a personality like mine is that not everybody processes like that. And it can feel overwhelming in the moment for people. So I have to modulate that. I have to be empathetic to them and who they are. And so there's good and bad to that. But authentic, I think absolutely you would get that from, everyone. And I think that the other thing you would get is really intentional. I'm incredibly intentional about the conversations I have, about the way I support people, the way I mentor people, and my expectations for what we're trying to do at the company and how people contribute to that.
That is just super powerful because, again, this is an area where people just fall flat on their faces. Leaders, so being intentional about the relationship part, because if you are intentional about the things you just described with how you support people and how they're and how they can be involved and how they add to the end result, you're going to get so much more out of them. You'll make them feel like the work they're doing is really meaningful. And that is one of the biggest drivers for people to stay with an organization. And it's because of the leaders making their people feel certain ways. And if you can make them feel that the work they're doing means something more than just a job or a paycheck, that's where the beauty's at. And that's what you just described.
Yeah. And, what I just described, hearing you reflect it back to me, I think, well, that sounds overly positive. like they think I'm amazing all the time. I don't think they think I'm amazing all the time. I think I'm a challenging CEO to work for, just like every CEO. I challenge people. I expect a lot from people. So I don't know that intentional always feels positive to them. But it is the way I think that you create an atmosphere where people know how to progress, right? Is sort of an intentional atmosphere or at Substantial, because we've been around for 12 years, right? So this is not a new company. And we are in the client services business. And so it's very volatile, much like many, many agencies and studios around the country that are small and independent. We have an incredibly volatile business that can be high stress. It's pretty much always high stress. So I'm trying to instill a sense of purpose in a business that can feel very much out of our control. And that's really challenging. And sometimes I succeed and sometimes I don't. I think, honestly, one of the things we're really working towards this year, both from the leadership team and the company, is to redefine what our purpose is in the world. We've gotten away with over a decade of not really defining that incredibly clearly. And I have made it my sort of mission this year to be super clear about that. And it's not just me by myself. Like, I'm not in a room going, what's my mission? What's the company's mission? I have a mission as a leader, but the company's mission is very different. And as I said, because it's such a high stress environment and so much of it feels out of our control, I think this is particularly important. It's really hard. I could pinpoint some things that are really special about Substantial that will be a part of that mission. But when I go to articulate it, even I have a hard time articulating it. And that's a really weird feeling to have as CEO of a company that's been around as long as Substantial has. So it's something I'm working very deeply on. I've got help. I've got people who are coming in to sort of help me do this. But when you read about leadership and you read about successful companies, almost the first mantra that people have is like, oh, it's got to have this mission. It's got to have this mission. And we've succeeded and thrived without that for a while. That doesn't mean I believe that's the right way to do it. So that's a big part of my work this year.
Well, I think that's great. And earlier when I said what I said, partly is because I'm easily inspired and I'm a positive kind of energetic person anyway, if you can't already tell. So when you describe that to me, I'm an empath as well. And I just immediately say, okay, the conversations that you have, mentoring people, there's still beauty in it not always feeling right. But in the end, there's clarity. And again, many organizations don't have that. Now, I know you're trying to gain more clarity in the organizational side, but you as a leader, if you're being very clear about what the end result needs to be and very clear about what they need to do to get to that end result, there's still brilliance that's inside of that because it doesn't exist in many places. In fact, when I read many employee engagement survey comments, most people are like, I have no clue what I'm supposed to be doing. Like this person's not communicating effectively. They're not communicating consistently. And I don't really know how what I do connects to what's supposed to get done here. So if you're able to get that part done, that's one of the biggest problems that I see in organizations. So now you're just backing yourself up and trying to be more visionary and global in this whole mission purpose setting thing.
Exactly. Yeah. And, things are changing so quickly in technology, in our space and consulting and client services as well. So it's really about, taking the time and a moment to say, hey, who we thought we were and who we've been for over a decade is great and has been successful. And we have phenomenal human beings who work here. But let's think about the next 3 years. And I mean 3 years, because I don't think that in the pace of change, thinking about who we are in 5 years or 10 years is actually worth our time in this moment. I want to think, right? I'm thinking in the 3-year time frame, because things change that quickly.
Yeah, I would agree with you. It's like sometimes being more being shorter sighted is actually more longer, bigger picture strategic view because of that rapid change. And it's tech and it's banking. It's a lot of industries that are moving very quickly, usually because of the tech. I was reading an article the other day in HR Executive, and it was talking about artificial intelligence and just technology and all the things that are going to be helping from the perspective of the workforce, and because that's the place that I'm in. And one of the things it said is, irrespective of all the technology and all the changes, what's still going to be required are those who are going to be empathetic, who are going to communicate effectively, those who can relate to people. So the skill that you have as this new CEO is exactly what your organization needs going in to this kind of new era. You're going to have the leader who has the ability to do the things you described yourself to be. So that's the exciting thing, Carey.
It is. And that's what I want to grow in all the people around me. So when I work, I have a lot of direct reports for a CEO. I still have 11 direct reports. Yeah, I know. It's sort of a function of what size we are. We're about 45 people, so we're kind of small. So it's partly because of that, but it's also partly because I really love working in that way. I love working one-on-one with people. And so it's one of the things I think about the most is how can I develop that empathy, emotional intelligence, those skills in the people that I work with in their own way, right? It doesn't mean they're going to be like me, right? They're not going to be exactly the way I am, but they're sort of marry their superpowers with that emotional intelligence, that empathy, and their own intention and authenticity. Because I agree with you. I'm doing a talk at a conference next week on the future of work, and a lot of it is about how we're going to navigate that space and the skills we need. And this is it, right? Because when you think about it, the transition to have a lot more artificial intelligence and technology taking on major parts of the work that we currently do is that we're going to be left with a lot of people who have feelings about that. They're going to have feelings about where they sit in their work world and their career and in their life as things really transform around them. And they are going to need help navigating that. Their managers are going to have to help navigate that with them, their supervisors, their executives, their leaders. And so I want to create a leadership, a troops basically that have that capability, that are ready for that.
Yep. That's awesome. I think that's exactly the way to be thinking about it. So yay, kindred spirit on the line. I love it. Okay. Here's one of those tough questions where you have to, you put some thought into it. Can you think of a specific time when you basically were not the best leader? I know you talk about now that there's this where you're not perfect now, and I get that. But when was a time when you were particularly maybe disappointed in yourself as a leader? And then what did you do to move out of that and into a place that you're still evolving right into, but you're still more enlightened?
Yeah, I mean, I can actually think of a few, but one that occurred to me not even that long ago, honestly, was sort of this transition moment when I took on CEO. So this is, the biggest moment in my career. This is a huge responsibility with a company that I adore and want to see succeed long into the future. And it was a huge responsibility, but it was this massive opportunity, right? For growth, for learning, all of these things, right? So I was stoked. I mean, I fought for this role, right? I wasn't handed this. I had to fight for it. I had to prove why I was the right choice. So you go through all of that and you think, holy crap, I got it. Which truly I didn't believe I would. So I was on cloud 9, right? Like I was, zippity doodah. I mean, I was stressed and I had a ton of work. I mean, I was working just constantly, but I was working constantly because I wanted to, right?
Mm-hmm.
I was driven. I was passionate. I was showing up every day with just this absolute drive. And the team around me was not. And I was like, I think we were all looking forward to some new leadership. They were all on the same page. I don't think there was, a mutiny underway, but their passion was not there. Their energy was not in the same place. And we had this offsite, and I remember sort of asking this provocative question about how much people wanted to be there, honestly. And, my team was very honest in that moment and vulnerable, and I really appreciated it. And at the time, their sort of lack of massive amounts of drive and passion made me sad. And I thought about it for quite a bit, was like, what am I doing wrong? What am I missing? And then all of a sudden it occurred to me that I was handed a change. I was handed an opportunity. I was handed a moment to step up. And they are all in the exact same job they were before. And they weren't handed that necessarily. They were handed sort of a mandate to, hey, you have a new leader. We're going to be changing things. Follow along. But I hadn't really spent time with each and every one of them to talk about how their job could change, where they could go in their career, right? I had just sort of stepped into this massive moment for me and then was shocked when they weren't feeling all the same groovy things about their own job. And I don't know why that wasn't so obvious to me at the beginning. I think I was wrapped up in myself, frankly, and sort of selfishly thinking about this huge challenge that I had and all these great things I was going to do. And it took that moment, a few moments of realization to backtrack and go, okay, wait a minute. My job is to serve them, right? Their job isn't to serve me. I am supposed to be supporting and helping them do their jobs better. And that was a really beautiful mind shift. I wish I'd had it on day one. If I could do it all over again, I would. I would think about this more clearly. I would be less myopic and focused on myself. It was a really selfish moment in retrospect. And I'm grateful now that I have sort of had that realization, because it's changed the way I interact with them. It's changed the tenor of my one-on-ones with them. And I'm starting to see, these sparks again. It hasn't changed things overnight, but I'm starting to see the sparks, and beyond any outcome or expectation of success, it feels better. My relationship to each of the leaders on my team feels more productive and feels more supportive and healthy.
Interesting. Yeah, it's interesting. I think this is probably another kind of leadership disease, which would be, getting ourselves out of our own way. Our image of ourselves, whether we're new to the role or been in the role for a while, sometimes can be completely distorted. And it's just, sometimes it's culture, sometimes it's personal. It's just historical. There's so many reasons why this happens. We keep visualizing that leader with the Superman, thing on his chest and a cape or a sword and a shield, something where it's just like there's this power and I think the beauty comes in when we realize that when we put the shield and the sword down, when we take the cape off and we stand next to our people in that supportive capacity, I think that's where the true value of leadership comes from. And it's hard. It's a difficult thing to get ourselves out of our own way and out of the way of cultures and the way of history and the way of just all these preconceived notions that are there about leadership.
Yeah, absolutely. I think about that a lot. Like what most companies, all teams need, they don't need a hero. They need a leader. And that's two very different things, right? A hero comes in and saves the day. A leader, right, works with the team to save the day. And that's two very different things.
Love it. Yeah, that's great. So when because you're in tech and it gets crazy busy and people are running all over the place trying to meet deadlines and trying to differentiate, what do you do to reconnect with them when there's just any downtime at all to do that at a deeper level?
Well, we just had an offsite Wednesday where we spent half a day at my house, actually, because I live pretty close to the office. So it's interesting because we started having offsites at our houses rather than at venues, mostly just to make it easy, quick, and cheap. So you have no guilt about having an offsite. You already have guilt when you do an offsite because you're like, you're taking away from your work. You're not available. And so, people might perceive it as very ivory towerish if they're at an offsite, like they're at some fancy venue or whatever. And so we started just let's just do them at our house. There's no guilt. It's easy. We can do it. And so that was the intention. But one of the outcomes was that it feels really personal. It feels very authentic and intimate because you're in one of your coworkers' homes. And so we just had our quarterly offsite. It's a half day on Wednesday. And it's space to have deeper conversations. It's space to let conversations meander a little bit. I'm still pretty driven. We have aggressive agendas. Sometimes I have to stop myself, let the conversation meander. This is important time. And then we all went to dinner afterwards and just got to be together, which we don't have enough time to do that in our day-to-day. It is very high pressure and high stress. We tend to not want to have long meetings, so we have shorter meetings, but that means you're really driven in those meetings, right? We must finish this agenda and get through all of these sort of important topics. Mm-hmm. And there's a lot less moments for, how are you? What's going on? So it's really important, I think, to have those regular moments of that. We did a few days of offsites at the end of last year to prepare for this year. That's when we do all of our annual planning. And that was the moment that I realized they're intense, but they're really helpful for us to reconnect as a team away from the pressures of the office. We're really trying to embody the fact that as a leadership team, even though we all have functional areas of direct reports, that we're still a team as leaders, right? That we actually have responsibilities to that team. As much as we do, if not more, than to our functional area teams. So those moments where we get to spend time together, I think, are really important. And we always leave them feeling a little bit more engaged with each other. Yeah,
that's I think that's great. And I love when people do, and I love the fact that you're doing it at homes. I think that just really personalizes it. We do have to take that time. We really do. I think back, on just my management career and the times that I had more clarity with what the needs for my team were. And it really was the times where we just didn't have maybe an agenda, or the agenda was done and we got to just talk. And then I said, I realize now where maybe I was not seeing something that I should have been seeing because I took that time to pay attention.
Yeah.
So for the leaders who might be struggling in their leadership or just at a crossroads, having challenges, what pearls of wisdom might you leave them with for the last part of the show?
Gosh, pearls of wisdom. Well, give yourself time to recharge. I can't stress that enough. So Substantial is a very I'm not even going to say work-life balance. I hate that phrase, but Substantial has established in the technology world an actual atmosphere where the rule here really is more often than not a 40-hour work week. That's incredibly unusual, particularly in product development and even more so in consulting. But we really have established that value, that we respect your lives. That said, it creates its own pressure. For the leadership team, and certainly for me, I feel the need to really pack in a tremendous amount of work in the 8-hour workday. And I do end up working quite a bit after hours, but that's, again, driven by my own objectives and goals. So the moments I get to recharge, I really, really need to recharge. And for leaders, particularly CEOs, I think this moment where they honestly don't think they have that permission in a lot of respects. Like, how could I possibly be off the grid? I run this company. But I encourage you to find a way to do it, particularly if you can do it for a week. Or more, if that's possible in your world. I get with small businesses in particular, particular that, we always do this. What's the coverage plan when leaders go out of office? And every time they look at me like, what's your coverage plan, Carey? I'm like, what? I don't have a second in charge. I have all of you. You're my coverage plan. There's nobody who can step in and make decisions in my place. Those decisions, in some respects, will have to wait. And that's really hard when your business moves fast. But I just went on a week-long vacation with my husband and daughter. It was her spring break. And I did not check email, nor did I get any phone calls, which could have just been luck of the moment. It was, or it could be that I think it was both luck and people really respected that I was trying to do that. It's the first time I've done it since I've been CEO. And it was just such a recharge for me. It really, really was incredibly helpful in the way I maintain my own health, and first of all, but also in how I approach my work. And I felt refreshed when I came back. And everyone talks about this as a thing. It's like getting sleep, right? It's now a part of our consciousness that these are things we need to do. But in practice, they are incredibly hard. They're much harder than just telling yourself it's important that I take vacations or get 8 hours of sleep a night. Your life interrupts those moments, right?
Absolutely.
So leaders really need to prioritize the ability to do this and start small. If you can't do it for a week, try a few days. If you can't do it for a few days, try one day and then build up from there until you have some comfortability, both disconnecting and your team has some comfortability that maybe some things are going to have to wait. And do it. It is the right thing to do for every leader's health, and I can't stress that enough. And I'm including these highly charged startup atmospheres where founders and CEOs are sort of just working themselves to the brink. I assure you that is not sustainable, and you should take a break.
Thank you.
Yeah.
Well, for those listening, I know that you've received some really good value. I got lots of notes. I take a lot of notes here. It's good stuff. But if you really enjoyed what you heard today from Carey, and of course any of those shows, please do go ahead and rate and review it wherever you listen. So exciting. We just found out that we're going to be on Pandora as well. So we're on over 25 platforms now, and it just keeps growing. But the idea is that when you do those, when you rate and review it, it actually helps this podcast kind of go up in the algorithm, and then more people can get access to this leadership podcast. And as you can see, it's unique because my goal is, I don't have advertisers and things like that. I'm not sure I ever will. The whole focus is really to be focusing on finding out what leaders that are more emotionally intelligent but not perfect have up their sleeves. And then the times when they're not so great and when they don't feel so good about their leadership, it's giving us some great solutions like Carey did today. So again, rating and review, it would be great. Give me referrals, just like this other person did that when they referred Carey to me, because I think this has been a great add to this show. And thank you for joining the show. And Carey, thank you as well.
My pleasure. This was great.
Thank you for listening to the Leadership with Heart podcast. You can grab the show notes by visiting customerfanatics.com. And don't forget to subscribe to our newsletter.